In the third year of working to gather medical expenses for my boyfriend, he was once again on the brink of death. Over these 3 years, I withdrew all my savings and mortgaged the house my parents left me. I delivered food, washed dishes, even sold blood. All because of his words, "I'll marry you once I get better." I continued to naively raise money for his medical bills. But while delivering food, I overheard him bragging to his friends outside a high-end KTV, "That silly girl Sophia, I just made up some excuse about being sick, and she believed it like a loyal puppy." Not only did she empty out her pitiful savings, she actually went to deliver food and work as a driver. A few days ago, I heard she was even moving bricks at a construction site to make money. Tell me, isn't a woman like that just ridiculously stupid? At that moment, the heart that had loved him for 3 years suddenly died. I dropped the food delivery and turned to call the ruthless, domineering underworld boss. "Liam, you once said that as long as I was willing to marry you, you'd be willing to marry me. Does that still hold true?" In the corridor of the KTV just a door away, I gripped the food delivery tightly, barely keeping it from falling. Miles's voice was slurred with drunkenness, but it couldn't hide the contempt and pride. "Sophia is really as dumb as a rock. That broken jade pendant her mom left her, she's always treated it like a precious treasure, and in the end, she obediently handed it over to me. Miles, I heard you used that pendant as a dog tag for your dog and ended up breaking it? If she found out, would she just cry herself to death on the spot?" Ha ha ha. My mind buzzed loudly, as if struck by a heavy hammer. That was the only keepsake my mother left me. I once believed that even if the whole world betrayed me, Miles would stand by my side and cherish everything I cherished. But in his eyes, my mother's heirloom was only fit to be a cheap trinket for his prized Alaskan dog, not even worthy of being called a plaything, something that could be broken so easily. A burst of louder laughter erupted in the private room, and Miles's triumphant voice rang out again. "That kind of woman, just a few sweet words and she forgets everything. The 100,000 yuan she worked her fingers to the bone to scrape together isn't even enough for us guys to have a night's fun." Exactly. Brother Miles, the cheapest bottle on our table tonight costs 300,000. Her little bit of money wouldn't even fill a tooth gap. It's absolutely hilarious. A bottle of wine costing 300,000 yuan, I gripped the cold takeout bag tightly in my hand, my nails digging into my palm, yet I felt no pain at all. I risked braving the pouring rain, weaving through the city, battered and bruised, all for a measly 100 yuan order. In his eyes, I was nothing but cheap and laughable. Miles continued, still smug, "But honestly, watching her pour her heart and soul out for me, like she's dying for it, is kind of entertaining. That stupid look on her face is truly a sight I never get tired of." I couldn't listen to the rest of it anymore. All my efforts and sacrifices had turned into a complete and utter joke. For 3 years, to pay for his treatment, I spent every last penny, sold the house my parents left me, and worked 3 jobs a day. During the day, I waited tables in a restaurant, being bossed around. At night, I worked as a designated driver, constantly on edge in the late-night city, and in the early morning, I helped unload goods at the wholesale market until I was exhausted. My palms still bore the stinging pain from carrying bricks that had rubbed my skin raw, and the ache in my back and waist never ceased. To cover the astronomical medical bills on his critical condition notice, when I was at my wit's end, I even went to the black market to sell blood. And he, Miles, the man I had loved for 3 years, actually said it was just a reason he made up on the spot. I no longer wanted such a hypocritical love. Trembling, I set down the takeout box, pulled out that old phone with the cracked screen, and stiffly scrolled to a name I had buried deep at the bottom of my contacts, Liam. The call was almost immediately answered, and his voice came through, as always, low and magnetic, "Sophia." I took a deep breath, summoning all my strength to make my voice sound calm. "Liam, you once said that as long as I was willing to marry you, you would be willing to marry me. Does that still hold true?" There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone, then a voice, trembling slightly but resolute to the point of impossibility. "Sophia, a promise is forever. In 3 days, I will come to get you." After hanging up with Liam, I numbly returned to the less than 30 square meter rental where Miles and I lived. The air was a mix of cheap scented candles and damp mildew. Once, I thought this was the smell of home, but now it made my chest ache painfully, almost nauseating me. Miles came back late at night. He pushed open the door, his face showing just the right amount of weakness and exhaustion, clutching a crumpled medical diagnosis in his hand. His voice was hoarse, his eyes filled with deep affection and reluctance as he spoke of the grave illness, needing $1.5 million. Sophia, I know how hard you've worked for me. Once I get better, we'll get married. I promise to make you the happiest bride in the world. If I had heard these words a few hours ago, I might have been moved to tears, willing to do anything to raise that life-saving money for him. But now, all I can smell is the strong lingering scent of alcohol on him. That foreign liquor they casually mentioned costs $300,000 a bottle, and its kick is truly strong. I didn't ask about his well-being as I usually would, nor did I inquire how much was still needed for the medical bills. I just quietly looked at him. This face that once made me fall for him now felt utterly strange and repulsive. He probably noticed my unusual behavior as well. His eyes flickered a few times, a trace of panic creeping in. But having deceived me for so many years, he was already well practiced, quickly launching into a new round of performance, trying to soothe me with even more cloying sweet talk and emptier promises. He said he would love me forever, that I was the only light in his life, that he couldn't live without me. I looked at him and suddenly felt exhausted, lacking even the strength to question him about the jade pendant or to expose his lies. There is no greater sorrow than a heart that has died, perhaps that's what it feels like. Sophia, do you not love me anymore? You're indifferent to me. Do you think raising money for my treatment makes you some kind of hero? Let me tell you, I can live just fine without you. The mask of deep affection finally slipped, revealing a trace of impatience and irritation, and in the end, he slammed the door with a bang and left. A bitter smile crossed my lips. This was his usual trick, to force me into submission this way, waiting for me to coax him, to beg him, to give everything for him. But this time I didn't move. I slumped onto the cold floor, looking around the little home we once shared. Every item seemed tainted with his hypocrisy, filling me with a profound sense of irony. How many of those sweet words were genuine? And how much of that tender affection truly came from the heart? I took out my phone, about to erase all his contact information completely, when suddenly a notification popped up on the screen, a friend's live stream, the profile picture belonging to one of Miles's rowdy buddies. On a whim, I clicked in. The live room was awash with flashing lights and loud music. Miles sat right in the center, arms draped around people on both sides, his face flushed with health and joy. There was no trace of illness or sorrow. He was slapping backs with his brothers, spitting out boasts about his womanizing skills. Then, I heard my name. That bitch Sophia. Miles took a big gulp of liquor, his tone flippant and smug. She's nothing but a nanny and an ATM. When I say a word, she doesn't dare make a sound. Mark my words, in less than 3 days, she'll be crying, begging me to come back home. The live chat immediately erupted with laughter and flattering comments. Miles, you can't say that. Where would you find a nanny with such a great figure? You're really lucky. Someone earns money to support you during the day, and at night there's someone to keep you warm in bed. TSK TSK TSK. Us brothers here can only envy. But I wonder, can her little body handle all the rough treatment from you? Exactly. She usually looks so aloof and indifferent, but with Miles in bed, it must be a total contrast. That moan, TSK TSK, it must be absolutely intoxicating. They shamelessly discussed my body, using the filthiest language to speculate about the intimacy between us. The barrage of comments on the screen echoed the voices, a flood of filthy words stabbing at my eyes. I couldn't watch any longer and abruptly shut down the livestream. My stomach churned violently. I rushed to the bathroom and vomited until the world spun, as if trying to expel all the grievances and disgust I had bottled up over the past 5 years. With trembling hands, I blocked and deleted every contact of Miles. Miles, goodbye. From now on, you will never exist in my world again. I began packing my bags. In this tiny rented room, there really weren't many things that belonged to me. Most of the space was taken up by Miles's discarded blueprints of his so-called entrepreneurial dreams that he claimed would change the world, and design models that were utterly impossible to realize, piles of trash mocking my foolishness. I dragged out a dust-covered cardboard box from under the bed, filled with gifts he had given me. I picked up a cheap crystal ball, something he bought for $10 at a street stall after one of his bankruptcies, when I was crying and feeling lost about the future, as a form of consolation. At the time, he had sworn, "Sophia, don't be afraid. Look at this crystal ball. It may be small, but inside it holds a whole world. Our future will be like these snowflakes, though it will face storms and rain, it will ultimately become beautiful." I sneered coldly, raised my hand, and with a sharp crack, smashed the crystal ball against the floor. Beautiful? Miles, my world has already been destroyed by you. I opened that old phone with the cracked screen and clicked on the chat history between Miles and me. The screen was densely filled with him calling me fool, dummy, and little scatterbrain. Once, I thought those were pet names between lovers, full of affection and teasing. Now, it's clear that every single word was his true judgment. He looked down on me. I still remember when he first claimed he was seriously ill and needed immediate surgery. I stayed by his side in the hospital without rest for a whole 2 weeks. Back then, I naively believed he was my entire world. If he were gone, my sky would collapse. He held my hand and said, "Sophia, when I get better, I'll give you a grand wedding and make you the happiest bride in the world. I swear, in this life, I will only love you." Looking back now, when he was lying in that hospital bed, watching me grow haggard for him, running around for him, giving him everything I had, he must have been laughing wildly at my naivety and foolishness. My gaze fell on the photo on the bedside table, me and my mother. In the picture, Mom smiled gently and kindly, wearing that dark green jade pendant around her neck, its smooth luster highlighting her smile. Tears are unstoppable in front of loved ones. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face deep into the musty-smelling blanket, the sobs I had held back for so long finally breaking free. "Mom, I'm sorry, I have been an unfilial daughter." Before she passed, Mom trembled as she placed the jade pendant around my neck. "Sophia, this was passed down from Grandma. It will keep you safe. You must take good care of it." That jade pendant was the vessel for all my warm memories of my mother. But 3 years ago, because of Miles and that forged medical bill for $200,000. Because of his words, "Sophia, if I can't raise the money, I really will die," I took it off in tears and, looking back every few steps, pawned it. At the time, I was still naive, thinking that once he recovered, we would work hard together to earn money and redeem the pendant. The hope my mother guarded with her life was, in his eyes, so utterly insignificant. Tears soaked my pillow as I wiped my face fiercely, repeating over and over in my heart, "Sophia, don't cry. He's not worth it." On the last day before leaving, I contacted the agency to cancel the lease. But as I dragged my tired body around the corner of the office building corridor, a familiar figure unexpectedly came into view. It was Miles. He was holding a provocatively dressed, curvaceous woman in his arms. The two of them, acting intimately, laughing and chatting, walked out of an office marked investment company. Miles's hand even wandered restlessly to pinch the woman's ample hip, prompting a coquettish pout from her. I recognize that woman. She's one of Miles's rowdy friends, often showing up at their various gatherings. She's also one of the people in that livestream who mocked me with the most vulgar language. Around the corner, their conversation pierced my ears clearly. "Brother Miles, if that fool Sophia still refuses to admit she's wrong this time, should I help you come up with another plan to teach her a proper lesson? After all, last time you two argued, it was my idea to make her stand in the wilderness, drenched in rain all night. That must have been a terrible experience for her, right?" My head exploded with a buzzing roar, as if countless steel needles were piercing my heart all at once, the pain so intense I could barely breathe. It turned out to be her. 3 months ago, I took a driving gig, and the client specifically asked me to go to a remote suburban villa that even navigation couldn't find. When I arrived, the client said something came up and told me to wait in the car. As a result, I left my phone in her car, and my electric scooter mysteriously wouldn't start. In that godforsaken place, with no village ahead or shop behind, I called out to the heavens and the earth, but no one answered. To make matters worse, it started pouring rain that day. Soaked through, cold, and scared, I groped in the dark and ended up walking on foot for 7 or 8 hours before finally getting home. The next day, I came down with a high fever and nearly died in that freezing rental. At the time, Miles was still holding me, his face full of pity as he scolded me for being too foolish, for working so hard to earn money, saying he would feel hurt. But now she says it was all carefully planned by them. They treated me like a monkey to be played with, laughing at my expense. All my pain and humiliation became their casual jokes for amusement. A great injustice and fury surged within my chest, and I could no longer control myself. I rushed to an empty stairwell, trembling so violently I could barely stand. I couldn't hold back any longer and dialed Liam's number. "Take me away. Now. Immediately. Please, I beg you, please take me away." On the other end of the phone, Liam's voice was restrained and steady, yet the urgency and pain seemed about to overflow. "Don't be afraid, I'm coming right away." Miles probably only began to feel that faint trace of unease the day after I completely disappeared. He was, as usual, hanging out with that group of scoundrels at the bar. When someone mentioned me, he would casually wave it off, his tone laced with his usual arrogance and disdain. "The little wildcat is just throwing a tantrum. Leave her alone for a few days, and she'll come back obediently. Does she think she can slip out of my grasp?" He was always so confident, so certain that I couldn't live without him, so sure that no matter what he did, I would, like countless times before, eventually return to his side. However, that faint composure must have completely shattered the moment he received the call from the agent. "Mr. Miles, your girlfriend Miss Sophia came by yesterday to handle the lease termination and has already moved out. Do you want to renew the lease on the apartment?" "What did you say? Moved out? Where could she possibly have gone?" "She said something about her family arranging it, that she's going home to get married." Miles suddenly sprang up from the sofa, his voice cracking with shock. "What did you say? Married? To whom? How dare she?" he roared, his face contorted with rage, no longer able to maintain the facade of the charming gentleman. The women fluttering around him were startled by his sudden move and tried to grab his arm. But Miles roughly shook off their hands, cursing, "Get lost." He grabbed the car keys and stormed out of the bar, leaving a mess behind him. Impossible. Sophia, that woman, loved him so much, worshipped him like a god. How could she leave him? And get married? It was an absolute joke. She must be throwing a tantrum again, trying to get his attention. It had to be that. Stuck in traffic, he cursed at the driver ahead, and the two ended up fighting in the street. It was only after his assistant slipped a wad of cash to the other driver that he managed to get away. When Miles used the key to open the rental apartment where we once lived together, the room was empty. All my belongings, the cheap clothes he once sneered at, the rough handmade ornaments, the old reading lamp I used, had vanished without a trace. An unprecedented wave of panic surged over him like a tide, crashing straight into his forehead. His eyes darted wildly around the room, like a rabid dog, desperate to find any trace I had left behind to prove I hadn't truly gone. Finally, his gaze settled on the crumpled piece of paper by the trash can. With trembling hands, he picked it up and unfolded it. It was unmistakably the delivery order I had made to the KTV 2 days ago. In that instant, it was like a bolt from the blue. KTV, those words he and his brothers had spoken that night. She knows. His hand shook violently, the thin slip of paper nearly slipping through his fingers, his face as pale as paper. She knows everything. Liam moved faster than I could have imagined. In just one day, I found myself at his private villa. Years apart had only made him more composed and reserved than I remembered, his posture upright and steady like a pine tree. Time seemed to treat him exceptionally well. Not only did it leave no trace on his handsome face, but it also added a certain mature charm to him. He wore a dark casual outfit, lacking the sharpness of the business world but carrying a warmth more suited to home. When he saw me step out of the car, his eyes held the joy of reunion and a tenderness that was unmistakable at a glance. He quickly walked up to me, his gaze locked tightly on my face. He didn't ask what had happened, nor did he mention Miles. Instead, he reached out, wanting to touch my cheek, but just as his hand was about to make contact, he hesitated and pulled it back. "Sophia, welcome home." His voice was low, carrying a hint of restrained trembling. The words "go home" struck my heart softly. All the grievances and hurts I had endured over the years surged out at this moment. I could no longer hold back, throwing myself into his arms and crying out loud. Liam's body stiffened noticeably for a moment, but then he immediately pulled me tightly into his embrace, his large hand gently patting my back, silently comforting me. I didn't know how long I cried, until my throat was hoarse and my tears had dried up. Only then did I gradually calm down. He had someone prepare hot water and clean clothes for me, and the room he arranged was decorated exactly according to my tastes from my girlhood. Pink walls, curtains trimmed with lace, a soft wool carpet, and even a set of fairy tale books I loved most back then placed on the desk. "Miss Sophia, this was specially prepared by the gentleman for you." Every item in the room was personally selected by him. "Uncle Warren." Liam frowned, stopping the butler, but he noticed the unnatural flush at the tip of his ear. The gloom in my heart suddenly vanished, and it was hard to imagine that the powerful tycoon who now ruled the storm still reserved a cautious tenderness for me. That night, he did not stay in the same room as me. After settling me in, he stood at the door, looking at me deeply. Then he softly said, "Sophia, rest well. With me here, no one will ever hurt you again." With that, he turned and left. I knew he was giving me space, carefully testing my boundaries, afraid of touching my sensitive nerves again. Lying on the soft, comfortable bed, surrounded by a familiar fragrance, I found myself unable to fall asleep for a long time. I thought about my past with Liam. We grew up together in the same orphanage. He was a few years older than me, a little tyrant since childhood, but he was especially protective of me. He would secretly slip me the candies the director gave him, and whenever I was bullied by other children, he was the first to rush in and fight for me. Later, we naturally fell in love. Young love was like sugar that never dissolved. Those days, though poor, were the most carefree and purely joyful times of my life. But when he was recognized by that mysterious family and began taking over those shady businesses, everything changed. He grew stronger and colder, and the ruthless, decisive look in his eyes made me feel strange and afraid. I was afraid he would go down a path of no return, afraid he would be lost forever, and I begged him desperately to wash his hands of it and leave that world full of bloodshed and intrigue. But he always said the time wasn't right, that he had responsibilities he had to bear. His need for control grew stronger and stronger. He wanted to control everything about me, claiming it was protection, but it suffocated me, and all I wanted was to escape. In the end, after I nearly drove myself to madness with self-harm, trying to force him to let go through such an extreme method, he finally gave in. I remember him looking at the scar on my wrist, his eyes filled with pain and guilt, his voice hoarse and uneven. "Sophia, I'll let you go. But remember, whenever you need me, I'll always be here." Now, I truly need him. And he, just as he said, has always been here. In the days that followed, Liam took care of me with meticulous attention, yet maintained a subtle distance all the while. He would personally cook for me. Although the dishes he made were few and the taste was only average, I knew how rare and precious this was for a CEO of a billion-dollar conglomerate who was busy managing countless affairs every day. I ate his burnt food while forcing a pleased expression to satisfy his small sense of accomplishment. I knew that in front of me, he was always a child, and of course, I was the same in front of him. He would watch those boring soap operas I used to like with me, even though he often frowned while watching, clearly uninterested in the melodramatic plots, yet he patiently stayed by my side. Seeing his helpless yet unwilling to run away, defeated expression, I couldn't help but laugh and quietly leaned in. Do your subordinates know you're like this? Shut up, he said, turning around, his face already flushed red. Still shy at your age? I teased him relentlessly. Ahem, I'm going to bed now. You should get some rest too. He got up and staggered toward the bedroom. Watching his back, I felt like I was seeing the young Liam again, awkward, shy, gentle, and sweet. He would patiently listen as I poured out the grievances and heartaches I'd endured over the years. Though I didn't mention much about Miles, I mostly complained about the hardships of life and the treachery of people. Whenever I was emotionally upset, he would quietly hand me a cup of warm water or gently pat my shoulder. His hands were still warm. He told me that over the past few years, he had been working hard to completely legitimize the family business, cutting ties with those dark and dangerous dealings he once was involved in. He said he was doing all this so that he could stand before me with pride and give me a stable, worry-free future. Sophia. He looked into my eyes, his gaze serious and solemn. I don't want you to worry about me anymore, nor do I want you to suffer any harm because of me. I was wrong before, wanting to hold on to you too tightly, which only made you feel scared. From now on, I will respect all your choices and give you enough freedom and space. I could feel the deep affection in his eyes, along with the desire he was deliberately suppressing. At night, I often woke up startled by nightmares. The scenes of being deceived, toyed with, and humiliated by Miles haunted me, causing unbearable pain. Every time I screamed awake from a nightmare, Liam would rush to my room in a panic, holding me tightly and soothing me. He held me close, his heartbeat steady and audible right by my ear. He softly told me that everything was over, that with him here, nothing would happen again. As I gradually calmed down, he would awkwardly turn his face away, a flicker of regret and unease passing through his eyes. I knew that this fool must have been standing outside my door all along, never leaving my side. Once, after I woke up again from a nightmare and he had comforted me, fearing I would get angry and resist his closeness like before, he was about to get up and leave. But the moment he turned around, he couldn't help but lean down and plant a gentle kiss on my forehead. At that moment, my heart trembled. This once arrogant man had now become so cautious and so precious of me in front of me. Finally, on a night when a gentle drizzle was falling, we stood side by side before the wide floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city nightscape outside, refreshed and renewed by the rain. He suddenly spoke, his voice a little nervous. Sophia, what happened back then was my fault. I shouldn't have pressured you so much, shouldn't have made you so scared. I turned to look at him, the rain blurred the neon lights outside the window, but it couldn't blur the love in his eyes. I whispered, Liam, it's all in the past now. He suddenly grasped my hand. His eyes flickered with emotion. After all these years, he still couldn't hide a single thought from me. So, Sophia, can we start over? I looked into his eyes, filled with overwhelming love, and saw his effort to hold back. I felt the burning warmth radiating from his palm. Suddenly, I thought, maybe I should be brave once more, just like the first time he stood up for me at the orphanage. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed his slightly cool, thin lips, responding with my most resolute voice, Liam, let's get married. He stiffened all over at first, his deep eyes widening instantly, unable to believe what he had just heard. Say that again. He held me tightly, his voice trembling violently with excitement. I looked at the tears glistening in his eyes and smiled, repeating once more, I said, Liam, let's get married. Say that again. You want to hear it again? Can't get enough. Then I'll keep saying it to you. He could no longer contain his love for me, bowing his head to kiss me, his unique dominance and coldness sweeping over all my senses. The next day, Liam announced our wedding date to the world with thunderous force. The news sent shockwaves through the entire business community. Everyone knew that Liam, the once ruthless and cold business tycoon, the underworld boss, had finally found his weakness, his queen. Our wedding was set on a private island by the picturesque Aegean Sea. Liam gave me everything every girl dreams of, even beyond all my imagination. A sea of pure white roses stretched from the beach all the way to the terrace where the ceremony was held, the air thick with the scent of flowers. I wore a wedding dress custom-made by a world-renowned designer, its hem studded with countless diamonds and pearls, sparkling even more brilliantly under the sunlight. Arm in arm with Liam, I stepped onto the red carpet strewn with rose petals, slowly making my way toward the center of the terrace, my heart filled with an unprecedented sense of happiness and peace. Yet, just as we were about to exchange rings, a roar shattered the moment's tranquility and beauty. "Sophia! You can't marry him." I whipped around to see a disheveled figure stumbling out from a nearby thicket of flowers, wildly shaking off several black-clad bodyguards who tried to hold him back. It was Miles. His hair was disheveled, his clothes in disarray, and his eyes bloodshot, like a rabid dog on the brink of death. How did he find this place? Instinctively, I tightened my grip on Liam's hand, a surge of intense disgust and unease rising within me. Miles stormed toward us like a whirlwind, gripping my wrist so tightly it felt like he might crush my bones. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at me intently. "Sophia! Why are you marrying him? Tell me, have you never loved me at all? Can we start over? I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Please, give me one more chance. I can't live without you." His nails dug into my flesh. I coldly shook off his hand, looking at his ridiculous and pitiful expression with no trace of pity in my heart, only sarcasm and disgust. "Miles, what right do you have to say you love me? When you toyed with me like I was a fool, treated all my efforts as your amusement, gave the only keepsake my mother left me to your family dog as a toy, and then smashed it to pieces, where was your love then?" "No, Sophia. It's not like that." Miles shook his head frantically and tried to grab my hand again, but I recoiled in disgust. He wept bitterly, speaking incoherently. I was confused for a moment. I was egged on by those bastards. "I really have fallen in love with you. I can compensate you for the jade pendant, I can compensate you for anything. As long as you come back to me. You're always so confident, so full of yourself." I cut him off, speaking with undeniable certainty. "Miles, the moment I found out all your lies and deceit, I stopped loving you. No, maybe I never truly loved you. What I loved was just the false version of you that I imagined." "No. Sophia. You're lying to me. You must still be angry with me." Miles completely lost control of his emotions, screaming like a madman, trying to rush forward and hold me. But before he could reach me, a tall figure blocked his way. Liam stepped forward, holding me tightly behind him. His deep, piercing gaze shot coldly and sharply at Miles. The overwhelming aura he exuded crushed the once arrogant and wild Miles, who instantly seemed to shrink, barely able to catch his breath. "What do you intend to do to my wife?" Liam's voice was low and icy, filled with commanding authority and a fierce killing intent. Miles was intimidated by Liam's powerful presence. He instinctively took 2 steps back, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes. Then, looking at me, his gaze was filled with desperation. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees, ignoring the stunned gazes of the guests around us, clutching my legs and weeping bitterly, begging without any dignity, "Sophia, please, give me one more chance. I truly know I was wrong. I can't live without you. Only after leaving you did I realize how much I love you. Please, I'm begging you." This pitiful display was a stark contrast to the arrogant Miles, the young master who once looked down on me and toyed with my feelings so recklessly. It was utterly ridiculous. I looked at him, my eyes devoid of any emotion, and simply said, "It's too late, Miles. When you once trampled on my heart and treated me like a fool, you should have expected this day to come." With that, I didn't glance at him again, kicked him aside, and turned to link arms with Liam. Liam cast a cold glance at the kneeling Miles, then gave a subtle signal to the nearby security guards. Immediately, several burly bodyguards stepped forward and dragged Miles away from the wedding scene like a dead dog. Miles's heart-wrenching cries and desperate curses were soon drowned out by the melodious wedding march and the enthusiastic applause of the guests. I knew that the unbearable past between him and me had come to a complete end at this moment. The sunlight fell on me again, warm as ever. Liam held my hand tightly, touched my face, and said, "Sophia, I'm sorry that such a scoundrel disturbed our wedding." I shook my head and gave him a relieved smile. "It's okay, Liam, it's all in the past. Let's continue." The priest cleared his throat and resumed the interrupted ceremony in a louder, more commanding voice. Amid the blessings of family and friends, under the witness of the azure sea and sky, Liam and I exchanged rings and vowed to stay together for life. At this moment, happiness took tangible form. Our wedding night was spent in a top-tier seaview villa on the island, overlooking the entire Aegean Sea. The room was strewn with rose petals, flickering candlelight casting shadows on Liam's deep features, and the air was thick with a seductive atmosphere. The afterglow of passion had not yet fully faded when Liam held me tightly, burying his head in the hollow of my neck. Like a child lacking security, he whispered repeatedly in my ear, "Sophia, I love you so much. Promise me, please never leave me again, okay? I'm afraid of losing you once more." He was as fragile as a child, which softened my heart, and I couldn't help but hold him tighter. After his breathing gradually steadied and he fell into a deep sleep, I found myself wide awake. I gently slipped out of his arms, put on my robe, and stepped out onto the terrace. The sea breeze brushed softly, carrying a salty scent, while the moonlight spilled over the ocean, shrouded in a thin mist. At that moment, I heard faint footsteps behind me. I turned around to see Liam's trusted aide, the old butler who had watched him grow up, Uncle Warren. Uncle Warren held out a cup of warm milk with a smile. "Madam, it's late. Have some warm milk to keep yourself cozy." "Thank you, Uncle Warren." Uncle Warren looked at me, hesitating for a moment as if he had something to say. I smiled and said, "Uncle Warren, just speak your mind. There's no need to be so formal." Uncle Warren sighed and slowly began, "Madam, you don't know how hard Mr. Liam has had it these past few years." My heart suddenly tightened. "After you left back then, he was down for a long time, like a lost soul." Uncle Warren's eyes were slightly red. "He has always remembered the promise he made to you, especially the vow to quit the underworld and give you a stable future. To completely sever ties with those gray area businesses and fully legitimize the family's vast empire, he paid a heavy price. How could those old powers once attached to the family let go so easily? Those years were filled with endless framing and sabotage. Mr. Liam worked countless sleepless nights to clean house and consolidate resources, dealing with many thorny problems. He even offended numerous reckless desperados and came close to not making it back several times. Uncle Warren's voice choked slightly as he pointed to his back and arms. "Mr. Liam carries several scars on his body, all left from those years spent protecting himself and the family. Once, he went alone to rescue an important partner who had been kidnapped. He was stabbed 3 times and, due to excessive blood loss, he came close to death." I was momentarily speechless. I had never known that during the years I was away from him, he had endured so much. Mr. Liam did all of this so that he could one day stand before you openly and proudly. Uncle Warren wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and continued, "The day he received your call for help, he appeared calm on the surface. But after everyone left, he was alone in his study, like a child, crying and laughing at the same time. Then he held your photo and sat there all night, repeatedly asking me if he was dreaming, saying you were finally willing to come back, finally willing to give him a chance to make amends." Listening to Uncle Warren's memories, tears blurred my vision. It turned out that during the days I was gone, he had endured so much and sacrificed so much for me. This man had loved me in his own way all along, yet we had missed each other for so many years because of misunderstandings. I covered my mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. All the misunderstandings vanished like smoke, as if we were young again, holding each other's hands once more. I turned and ran back to the room, looking at Liam sleeping on the bed, a trace of fatigue still lingering between his handsome brows. I gently leaned down and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Liam, I'm sorry for making you wait so long, for all the pain you've endured," I choked out, whispering softly in his ear over and over, "From now on, I won't leave again." As for what happened to miles later, I caught bits and pieces from gossip news and Uncle Warren's reports. He caused a scene at our wedding, and after being thrown out, he completely lost his mind. When he returned, he took out his anger on the seductive woman who had once conspired with him against me, and the two parted on bad terms in the end. His family business was already on the brink of collapse due to the huge holes left by his unrealistic ventures and overseas investments. When he gave up on himself and stopped managing the company, the cash flow quickly broke down, and it declared complete bankruptcy. The mansion was seized, the luxury cars were sold off to pay debts, and he went from a wealthy heir who spent money like water to a penniless, broken man overnight. He began to drink heavily, drowning himself in alcohol every day, living a life of utter decay. The cruelest irony was that in the end, he actually contracted the terminal illness he had pretended to have countless times before. And by the time it was discovered, it was already in its final stage. I heard he lay in a shabby hospital room, barely clinging to life, refusing any treatment. He just kept murmuring that this was heaven's punishment, that he deserved it. His old close friends had long since scattered like birds and beasts after his downfall, not a single one was willing to see him. Only a distant relative, who had once received a small favor from him, managed to get in touch with me. They earnestly hoped I could come see him one last time, saying he had been holding on to my name all along. I simply replied calmly, "I have moved forward, I won't look back on the past." As for Miles, I no longer harbored any hatred or pity. He was no longer any concern of mine. My married life with Liam was sweet and steady, and I became the heroine of a fairy tale. He truly learned to express his feelings with more respect for me, no longer as obsessively as before. We built our home together and planned our future side by side. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as I leaned into Liam's warm embrace and turned to ask him, "Hey, if I want you to go to the beach with me every day to collect shells from now on, would you be willing?" "Of course I do." "Really? Don't you get tired of doing the same thing every day?" "How could I get tired of something I love?"